A couple of days ago, I was listening to the Side Scroller podcast, and they went on to talk about something that was changed 4 years ago. But just like them, I didn't really know or notice the difference. But I guess Capcom changed behind the stage in Street Fighter 2. In the newest re releases of the game, both the Capcom Fighting and the Capcom Collections, both 1 and 2, have his background slightly altered and censored. I don't play Street Fighter 2 very often, and when I do, it's an older version, with the most played version on my PC being the Street Fighter 35th anniversary, which did not get these cuts. Anyways, when Capcom first censored these stages, they just painted half this wall. This is my Photoshop recreation because I don't take other people's media, but this is basically what I saw and looked like. And yes, it looks awful. Capcom has since taken the recreation from Street Fighter V and downsized it to Street Fighter 2, where there's now just a glowing sun, and it doesn't look quite as good as the rising sun, but it's better than this gray wall where half the effect is missing. So, what are my thoughts and what are my guesses on why Capcom would do this? Well, it's complicated, especially for us Americans who, from our point of view, we value freedom of speech. Well, most of us do. Those of us that don't work for CBS News really values free speech. And it has to deal with the history of Asia, which I am not a historian. If anybody else in the comments section is and would like to share their opinions in the comments, please do so. I welcome them. Anyways, what the original flag is called the Japanese Imperial Rising Sun flag. Into Asian countries, it's kind of like the Confederate flag is to us Americans. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but it's in kind of the same vein. I'll explain. To a lot of people I know who live in southern states, the Confederate flag is that of rebellion, individuality, and southern pride. The people who wave it around have no intention of really returning to the Confederacy in the time of slavery, nor do they see it as such a symbol. Most of us who don't live in the South, especially those of us who've read a history book, do see it as a flag that belongs to a government formed to keep the institution of slavery intact and did not have the nobility a lot of people who use that flag today think it had. That said, when people were trying to ban it about 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of cringed. The best way to limit a flag's use and symbol of something you don't like is not to limit its use, it's not to ban it, but it's to oftentimes give out the information about what that symbol originally stood for. Oftentimes, banning and prohibiting things have a way of making them more popular now that they become taboo. Anyways, back to that imperial flag from Hansa's stage. This was a flag used by Japan during the time of 1875 through 1945. It was oftentimes used by their military. And why does that matter? Well, at that time, Japan was kind of in need of resources because it was growing, and they found those resources by conquering other nations in Asia and enslaving them. For example, one country that's very important in this discussion, Korea, was conquered and enslaved in 1910, and the Japanese committed atrocities. Not just talking about brutal work conditions under slavery, but we're also talking about sexual slavery for women. We're also talking about cultural destruction and mass murder. Skip to World War II, when the USA defeated Japan. Japan had to give up all those territories and they became their own countries again. But the Rising Sun flag with 16 rays was revived in 1954 for the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force as a naval insignia, not an imperial symbol. They see it as a naval tradition. Hence why Capcom would throw that symbol into a video game whose original market was the Japanese and to a few countries like us Americans who probably didn't know and probably cared less about its history and symbolism. It's just pretty flashy colors at the end of the stage to us Americans, and to a Japanese audience, it would be a perfect kind of flashy setting for this stage that's supposed to be an old traditional bathhouse in Japan. So, why change and remove it now? It's my belief that while Capcom hasn't publicly said why they removed the flag, it's probably to avoid losing sales in South Korea, where the Rising Sun flag is deeply controversial and offensive. Now, in the 90s, when Street Fighter II originally came out, Japanese cultural imports, including video games, were still banned from South Korea and had been banned since the end of World War II. Now, sure, people still played them there because bootlegging does exist, but Capcom, a Japanese company going there and selling their arcade machines directly to the South Korean audience, it wasn't going to happen. However, times changed and trade did eventually open up in the early 2000s, and now Korea is a market that Japan wants a big part of, especially in video games and online video games. We're talking about a $12 billion market for video games. And wait, what are both Street Fighter 5 and 6? Oh, yeah, they're online live service games. And you better not ignore a country that is gaming is so ingrained in the culture that people have died sitting in net cafes playing online games for several days straight without stopping. That's leaving a huge bucket of money on the table. The problem is they see that rising sun flag as a symbol of decades where they had no leadership, could be killed for protesting their harsh conditions, being enslaved, having sex crimes foisted against them, and numerous other crimes that the Japanese committed. While the symbol is not banned, it is considered deeply offensive, enough to while the game would still be allowed to be for sale in that country, you're probably going to be losing a significant amount of the market and get yourself into a drama you don't want. So that's probably why they 86 that flag and changed the background of that stage. So, what are my thoughts on this? Well, this rises above a Han shot first thing as it's actual censorship and removal of something. With that said, it's still kind of a minor thing and it doesn't change the game too much to where I would not recommend someone picking it up. These games are still classics without that symbol, and I should also note that at least for now, Capcom seems to have left the 35th anniversary collection alone. So if you do want a Street Fighter 2 completely uncut and see the original He Honda stage background art, then pick up a copy of Street Fighter 35th anniversary when it's on sale for less than $10. My problem, though, is that if Capcom decides to update the game and to put in the censor version, then we have a problem, and it goes to why this always online connected digital only world is not a perfect utopia they sold us on, and why offline physical media still has a place in this world and should still be used, especially with media that might have some controversy in it. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please leave a like and subscribe for more content.